Welcome to our final breakout session here in the main ballroom. Here to talk about cloud security, managing for the new normal. Please welcome Daniel Clayton.
Thank you very much. I thought this was going to be a little thing in a little room, and we're in a great big room with big screens again. So was everybody here for the main talk earlier on today? So you all know who I am, yeah? My name's Daniel Clayton, Director of Operations for Rackspace Managed Security. I won't go into any of this. As I said earlier, I'm old, and I've done some stuff for organizations like NSA and GCHQ. So listen, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the operation behind Rackspace Managed Security. We introduced you to the idea of it earlier on today, but I really wanted to give you a little bit more detail around some of the claims that we were making and the things that we do. So just start off really reiterating something that I said earlier on. You know, people don't always equate Rackspace to the idea of security. It's not always the first thing that they think about when they think about Rackspace. But actually, Rackspace has been around for about 16 years. 300,000 customers globally dispersed. So the reality is we've been dealing with security for our customers for a long time now, and we've been doing it fairly successfully. And as a security operations guy, what this means to me is I've got 300,000 targets that we're having to deal with, and we've got a globally dispersed adversaries who are attacking our customers on a daily basis. But we've been doing it successfully through our own internal security operations center since 2009, and so far we've done it with no material impact to our customers. So, you know, what we really wanted to do was take some of that expertise and that experience that we've built up defending Rackspace, defending Rackers, and defending our customers, and make that more directly available to our customers through Rackspace Managed Security. I can't see you, which is really frustrating because there's not many of you here. I feel like if I sit down, there's any, but no, that doesn't help. Say again? We are distributed. You are very distributed. So look, security has changed, and this is really the point that we were trying to make earlier. You know, you go back 5, 6, 7 years, and security was relatively straightforward. You know, it was bad people doing bad things on the internet, but it wasn't particularly sophisticated. They were kind of throwing out a lot of phishing campaigns, trying to get people to click on various things, and sometimes it was successful, and sometimes it wasn't successful. But it's really changed with the rise in sophistication and prevalence of the advanced persistent threat. And not only that, not only has the sophistication changed, but the way that the adversaries are using the information that they're able to steal and the data that they're able to exfiltrate is different. And if you think about some of the stuff that you've been seen on the news over the last few months, it's not just the traditional kind of steal data and sell it on the black market. We're also seeing now criminal exploitation, which we saw with the Ashley Madison, with the Ashley Madison hack. I think that's right. Ashley Madison, is it? Yeah. It's not something that I'll dwell on. I didn't know what it was, Ashley Madison, when people first talked about that. It's very, very confusing. And then we also saw criminals really for the first time with Sony actually trying to influence business decisions and really change the way that boards were behaving and the way that boards were acting. So, you know, there's a greater level of sophistication now, there's a greater level of persistence, and the bad guys are getting very creative about what they're going to do with their data and how they're going to use it to make money. So basically what that means is the old idea, this old, you know, perimeter-based security operation that most companies, most corporate organizations are still working to, and a lot of MSPs are still working to, it just doesn't, you know, it's not effective anymore, it doesn't work anymore. The perimeter is becoming less and less easy to identify anyway, and the tools that we stack on our perimeter in the hope of keeping the adversaries out, they're just not effective and they don't work anymore. You know, and we know that's true because the figures tell us that it's true. You know, current estimations are that 75% of all US companies have been breached. And the reason why it's an estimate is because many of those companies don't even know that they've been breached. And unfortunately, that news normally comes by way of a telephone call from the FBI to say, hey, by the way, your data is being sold on the black market at the moment. So let's consider that metric and then add another one to it. current amount of time for time to detect, so the time that it takes to get that phone call from the FBI or to realize that you've been breached yourself is somewhere between 150 and 200 days. And the single number that I normally see this year being quoted is 205 days. So think about those two things together. 75%, 3 out of 4 of all US companies have been breached, and then having been breached, it's taken that organization somewhere in the region of 7 months to realize that they've been breached. Right? So there's an awful lot of harm that can be done during that period of time. It's a long time. I don't have any of my notes, by the way, guys. Have we got the right version up here? In fact, this is an old presentation. This slide shouldn't be here. Never mind. I'll skip past it, as we do. I might just sit down and talk to you all because this is kind of... So these are just kind of slides in the wrong order and stuff. Do you want me to just carry on, or are we going to try and change it? Just carry on. Okay. Okay, we'll just carry on. Right, so what I'll try and do is talk, so I'm going to talk to the slides, and hopefully it will fit together in some sort of way that makes sense. It might not, we'll see, it'll be very exciting. Okay, so a new strategy for a new normal then. So listen, if you take those two metrics that I just talked about, the fact that 75% of all US companies have been breached, and then you add to that the fact that it's taken an awful long time to realize that companies have been breached, it means that they can get up to a lot in your environment and they can do some bad things within your environment. So if we're going to combat that, what we have to have is a different strategy. And you know, when we sit down and we do some operational mission planning and we start thinking about how we're going to put an operation together, it's fairly straightforward at the strategic level. You know, identify the threats that you're at risk to. Identify the capabilities that you need to mitigate those threats that you're at risk to, and then break that down into the people, process, and technology requirements that you need in order to deliver those capabilities and mitigate those threats. And this is key to our strategy, because when we looked at the threats that we were at risk to, you have to acknowledge the fact that these threats have changed. You know, so the old threats, as I talked about earlier, were fairly unsophisticated and they weren't persistent. But today, the threat's completely different. You're now talking about advanced persistent threat actors who are really, you know, what we're talking about here are government-backed organizations. In the case of China, you're talking about a branch of the Chinese army. And these guys are being recruited and then being retained. And what they do is they come to work, they're given a target by their government, so they're very well motivated because their government's asking them to do something and they believe in their leaders, in their leadership. And they're told, hey, we need to get access into this company's environment. So they'll spend 8, 10, 12 hours, whatever their shift is, doing what they can to circumvent the tooling that that has been put in place around the perimeter of that particular company. And if they're unsuccessful, if they're unable to hack into that environment, they'll go home, they'll have a bath, a glass of wine, play with their kids a little bit. Somebody else will come and sit in their chair and spend the next 8, 10, 24 hours trying to break into that company as well. And the reality is that sooner or later, they're going to find a way in. They'll find a way to navigate the tooling. Somebody will click on something that they shouldn't click on. Somebody will use a weak password, something like that. And the reality is the guys end up in the environment and then start moving around in the environment looking for the data that it is they're trying to find. And that's why we see that 75% of all of these organizations have been breached. So we have to combat that. Like, we have to combat the reality that that they're going to find a way past the tooling, that this perimeter defense in-depth strategy isn't going to work anymore. And the way that we do that is we concentrate on cyber hunting. So what we do is we completely abandon this traditional idea about waiting for an alert, waiting for a tool to tell us that something has gone wrong, and we physically get out of the trenches on behalf of our customers, and we go looking through the environment, looking for signs that an attacker has made it into the environment. So there's a slide that I want to show you that I obviously don't know if I've got, so I'm going to flick through these really fast. There we go. That's good. Okay. So this is the attack lifecycle. When an organization has found their way, when an attacker has found its way into an environment, they start to work their way through the attack lifecycle. Now, what we're able to do from a cyber hunting perspective is for each one of these categories that you see in these different boxes, there are a set of tactics, techniques, and procedures that the attacker will execute in order to achieve that part of the attack lifecycle, and then they'll move on to the next one. Now, each one of those things, it's difficult. Tools can't pick up these things because for each one of these TTPs, it has an impact on the environment. It has a technical impact on the customer's environment, and it leaves artifacts and benign artifacts that we can go and look for. So think of it this way. If I asked you to go and steal your boss's television, you wouldn't walk up to the door, kick the door down, wander in and steal the television. And if you did, you'd probably set some alarms off and people would know you were doing it and you'd be unsuccessful. What you'd probably do is spend some time casing the joint, seeing what his schedule was, when he was at home, when does he leave for work, when does he go. Now, you can't go look for that as a hunter. You can't go look for the fact that somebody's looking outside your window. But if they're smoking cigarettes and they leave cigarette ends, or if they're eating chips and they leave chip packets on the floor, these are things that you can go and look for, and they may be indicative of somebody spending some time outside of your house, and that in turn may be indicative that someone has been conducting recon on the house. So these are the things that we do for every level of the attack lifecycle, and our approach to it was very specific. What we did was we identified all of the threat actors that we believe threaten our customer base. And then we identified all of the TTPs for every part of the attack lifecycle that we know that they will execute in order to find a way into our customers' environments. And then we went and we recreated those TTPs in our Rackspace environments, and we observed the environment to see what happened. And what we found was, for each one of these TTPs, there was a different impact to the environment. There were different things, different benign artifacts that usually wouldn't be concerning, that because we know what they are and because we can go and look for them, we can go and search for these benign artifacts. And if you see patterns of them, then it gives you a clue that there might be something untoward going on. And what we did was invested heavily in our security analysts, and these guys have the technical expertise to look for these benign artifacts, identify activity and patterns of activity that maybe don't look right, that maybe together I was going to make the analyst think something might be up here, and then go and look a little bit deeper and get a little bit deeper into the investigation to see if something bad is going on. So if you imagine a tool can't do this, this is the problem that so many organizations have at the moment. They try to solve the security problem with a tool. And once an attacker has made it inside the environment, the first thing they do is take control of the box, and then they assume the credentials that are associated with that box. And they're now a legitimate user on the network. So anything that they do now, any tools that they use that are already in the environment, anything that they're doing to move laterally through the environment, can't be picked up by any tools because they're a legitimate user. But the things that they do, the TTPs that they start to execute in order to achieve their goals, we know the impact on the environment because we've already played it, and we can go and look for it. Does that make sense? I have no idea what's coming next. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, there's really, I would say there's three key components to our security strategy and what makes us different. And the second one really is rapid response. I said earlier when I was on stage that the way that most MSSPs work is they'll go and deploy some tool in, they'll wait for an alert, and then they'll throw it over the fence to the customer, and the customer then has to go deal with it, right? That doesn't work. On the last slide, I was talking about the attack lifecycle. The reality is that the further along that attack lifecycle an attacker is able to go, the harder and the more expensive it is to deal with them in the environment. I don't know if you guys noticed, but some of the subheadings on that last slide were things like obtaining a foothold in the environment, attaining persistence mechanisms, this type of thing. So if you think of it as, if we go back to the example of breaking into a house and stealing your boss's TV, one of the things that adversaries will do is while they're in the bedroom, they'll go and unlock a window, and they'll unlock the door where the other TV is so that they can go back later and steal that TV as well. And this is exactly what what the attackers do when they get, what advanced attackers do when they make it inside these environments. And what it means is they're very, very difficult to deal with. If you give them 5, 6, 7 months in their environment, they're going to get to know that environment very well. They're going to achieve a lot of persistence mechanisms in that environment. And then when you do finally become aware of them, they're so well established in that environment that they can't be contained and eradicated easily. So what happens is traditionally we pivot to what's called a graduated response. And what I mean by that is you've now identified something bad's going on. Your MSSP has told you something bad is happening. You've done a little bit of analysis and you agree. So the next thing you do is you call in an incident responder. Incident responder shows up, deploys some tooling, does some analysis with his own equipment, and then he agrees with you and says, yep, there's some bad stuff going on. This is exactly what it is. Here's a containment and eradication plan. And then you will go and execute that. And this whole period is going to take anything from 3 weeks to 6 months, depending on the size of the organization that we're talking about. Now, just to give you a little bit of insight into that, incident response costs in the region of $30,000 a day. So this is expensive. At this stage, if you allow the customer to have, if you allow the attacker enough time to achieve persistence in the environment, if they're in that environment long enough to make it easy for them to come and go as they please, it's going to cost you an awful lot of money to deal with it. So we have to put as much emphasis as we can in today's environment on our ability to detect through proactive cyber hunting, but also to respond and respond immediately. So we're in a unique position at Rackspace. You know, we manage the infrastructure on behalf of our customers. So we're managing the infrastructure that we're defending. So what we did when we created our CSOC was we embedded a sysadmin capability inside the SOC. And what we've done is we've put those analysts through the AWS training, the DevOps training that they need to do, and we're doing the same at the moment with Azure, so that when they see activity, when something happens, they're able to reach directly into that box and deal with it on behalf of the customers. The way that we do it, we use a process called pre-approved actions. And really what it is a portfolio of runbooks. So dependent on the activity that we see, when we see activity happen, the analysts know exactly what we need to do to remediate it because they know the environment, they know the impact of the TTPs within that environment, and they know exactly what to do to contain and remediate the problem. And it can be a host of things. It might be logging onto a box and changing passwords. It might be running an anti-malware tool. There's various things that it could be, and they stack on top of each other. So it'll be, hey, for this type of activity, we're going to run this runbook, and this runbook. And then they're able, as analysts, immediately to log on to the environment and execute those runbooks and remediate the problem on behalf of the customers. And what we do during our onboarding process is we have our customers pre-approve these actions. So we don't want to be in a position when we're trying to respond as rapidly as we can. We don't want to be in a position where when we see bad activity, we issue a ticket to our customers, we wait for them to come back to us and approve us to go and do something, because all of the time we're losing time, and time is money in terms of incident response. So they approve these actions for us during our onboarding process, and what that does is it enables us to go and act immediately on their behalf. It's very, very powerful, very effective. You now combine this proactive cyber hunting with the traditional tooling that we're using as well on the perimeter, and you add to that the ability to respond very, very rapidly in a very effective way when we actually do see bad activity. So think about that from a customer's perspective. Think about the experience from a customer. So instead of this traditional experience of an MSSP where they get thrown an alert and they have to figure out what to do with it and what to do next and what incident responder to engage with. What happens with us is we send them a report between 30 minutes and 60 minutes, depending on the type of activity that we're talking about and the criticality. And what that report says is, hey, we saw this activity. This activity was anomalous. This is what we believe it was. This is what we've done on your behalf, and everything's fine. So no work to be done on the behalf of no work to be done for the customer, no reason for the customer to be concerned. And actually, for many of these events, these security events now that we're dealing with, our customers don't even want that. You know, they're happy for us to wrap that up in their weekly or their monthly reporting, and they're really just much happier allowing us to deal with their entire security operation. They feel safe with us, they have confidence in the strategy that we've put together, and they really kind of leave us to it. So those two things are really important. Cyber hunting plus rapid response equals minimal business impact to the customer. So let me talk about that a little bit. You know, I talked about the old strategies, the security strategies of the past being based on defense in depth. That was a perimeter-focused security operation, not effective today, we know that. To be effective today, you have to focus on the data, not the perimeter anymore. You know, so we assume that an advanced attacker will eventually find a way into an environment. So the question then for us is, how do we deal with him before he gets to the data? And as we've seen from the amount of time that it's taken to detect, you know, up around 200 days, you know, it's not easy for an attacker to find a way into an environment and then know where the data is. It's a completely new environment for them, and it will take them weeks, if not months, to be able to move laterally around that environment, identify what it is they need, move it to where they can exfiltrate it, and then exfiltrate that data. So we have time. There's no need to kind of throw our arms in the air and give up because the Russians are coming or the Chinese are coming. You know, if we're clever about what we're doing and we understand the data that we're protecting on behalf of our customers, then we can do what we need to do to protect the data. And if we can protect the data, then we can minimize business impact to the customer. So what it means for us from a customer experience perspective is that during our onboarding process, we're very opinionated about understanding the data that we protect on behalf of the customers. So during the onboarding process, we go through a process where we have our customers rate, for every single server, they rate the data that we're protecting by business impact. So they'll tell us what the data is, and they'll tell us how that data impacts their business. And it's really important to us because it shapes our entire operation. You know, if we are going to drive more cyber hunting missions in an area where it's high criticality data than we are in an area where it's much less important data. So it'll drive how we do our customer security operations. It also will tell us if we know the data that we're protecting, then we can understand very quickly from the beginning what systems and what users should be interacting with that data, which allows us right from the very beginning to have a good idea about what normal looks like. And if we understand what normal looks like, then it's much easier for us to identify anomalous and then react to that when we see it. And the final piece with the data really is that we're going to react differently to alerts and to events depending on the criticality of the data where we see the alert. So we may react very differently to an alert that comes up on a certain piece of data that's a very high criticality. We might wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning to tell you that we're dealing with something. But if that's a low criticality, there's a good chance that we're just going to deal with it and wrap it up in our weekly or our monthly reporting and carry on with life. Okay, so my apologies, guys, for the fact that we got the wrong presentation and I had to jump around a lot there. I'm going to wrap up what I'm talking there because what I really wanted to do and what I was hoping to be able to do is just kind of have a bit of a chat with you guys, answer your questions and really just find out if there's anything in the room that we haven't been able to answer for you. So just to give me an idea, I can't see very well. You might have to wave. But have we got any security people in the room? Yep. It's really good. Okay, and so what about IT-focused people? So Okay, good. So is this, you guys, I know from what customers tell me every day that everybody understands the threat landscape. Hello, mate, how are we doing? Understand the threat landscape, and customers understand how concerned they should be about the advanced persistent threat because they tell us all the time. But did any of you learn anything new today? Was this old news for you? Was this just kind of confirmation of a fear that you already had? Yeah, go on.
For me, while I've got awareness of the risks and issues out there, there's a lot that needs to be filled in the environment. It's not one or a handful of things. It's hundreds of risks, hundreds of threats, and filling in that tapestry is part of what I'm getting out of this.
So how are you doing it at the moment?
Not as well as I'd like.
It's a good answer. So are you, do you have a team to do this, or are you kind of basing your solutions at the moment on technology?
Basing solutions on technology because I came into an environment where it was woefully underserved and it's just getting the building blocks in place.
So, you know, I think sometimes when we talk to people, they come away from it thinking that, these technology solutions are, completely ineffective and don't work anymore. And that's true when we talk about the advanced threats, when we talk about the advanced persistent threat. So I think one of the things that we have to deal with sometimes when we talk to customers is, first of all, customers then assume that everything else that they're dealing with, they need us to help them deal with it. That's not true. So the antivirus, the anti-malware, your IDS, your IPS, this signature-based tooling that exists today is very effective at what it does. And it deals with 60, 70, maybe 75, 80% of the, kind of the background noise and the stuff that we see that we're trying to defend against on the internet. So I wouldn't ever advise anyone not to do that. I think that you can be very effective with tooling, and they're a force multiplier to people in your situation. The real concern for me is when we talk to customers like you that just don't have the resources to be able to engage the expertise that they need to be able to take on the hacker one-on-one. And this really is the problem. The bad guys, long before we did, invested in expertise. They started pulling in these guys and training them and retaining them, and the longer you do something for, the better you get at it. And the reality now is that if we're going to take them on, we need analysts with an equal level of expertise, with an equal level of motivation, and as equally well equipped to kind of put in front of these hackers and deal with it. And the mistake that a lot of companies make at the moment is they go, the Russians don't care about me. And unfortunately, that's not true, because what we're seeing all the time now is, number one, a lot of the Russian APT threat comes from crime syndicates, and they don't care, they'll steal from anyone. But also what we see from a national level is that the Chinese and also the Iranians and the government-backed APT from Russia as well, APT-29 and these guys, they will use smaller customers as stepping stones, smaller companies as stepping stones in order to get to whatever their final goal is. So I think it's really important that, continue to do what you're doing with the technology, but think of it as a filter, and try to think about how you get some expertise and some of that additional expertise-based solution into your security operation. Has anybody else got any questions? Hello. Oops, sorry, next.
Trying to stay ahead of the hacker or whoever is doing the exploits, it's kind of tough because you have a lot of different moving variables. You have storage, you have like the network, you have the application, you have the infrastructure, and you have like everything end to end. And the proactiveness is good and everything, but how do you take 2 steps ahead of them to prevent that breach? And how do you detect that breach if you don't have, like what you were saying with him, as an individual, you don't have all the expertise, but as a service, how can you take it to the next level and prevent all those things and to be able to monitor those things?
Okay, so Jarrett, go and offer him a job. He's asking the right questions. No, so listen, you make a really good point. It's an arms race. It always has been, and we see it with car thieves. You go and make a car unstealable, and 6 months later, 6 days later, they figure out a way to steal the car, and then it goes back to the car manufacturers to go and figure out a way of making that car secure again. So how do we stay ahead of that? I think that the way I would answer that question is, when we put Rackspace Managed Security together, what we wanted to do was identify the set of services and the set of capabilities that we could put together that would serve as many of our customers as possible, as effectively as possible. But it was a start point. So Rackspace Managed Security, this kind of visibility-based proactive detection, advanced detect and respond security operation that we built, and the compliance assistance are only the first 2 of what will be many security operations. So we will add additional capability to that, and we'll start to bring in some of the additional things that you talk about, so that we have a more holistic, a more solution-based approach for our customers. And we're very conscious of it. Jarrett and I know that at the moment it's very frustrating to us. We get on calls with customers, they listen to what we've got to say, and they're like, this is fantastic, but I've still got this problem over here, and you haven't solved that yet. And we know that, but like we'll get there. So I think in the next, Well, I don't know exactly what the timers are. Let's call it 12 months. Over the next 12 months, what you'll see from us is we'll start to introduce some additional security services. I think we're very quickly going to add privacy and data protection to our service portfolio at the moment, to our security operation. We're very aware that identity and access management is one of the biggest challenges for our customers at the moment. It's not an easy problem to solve, but it's one that we need to go and solve. And we're actively looking into innovative and new ways of doing that on behalf of our customers. So I think over the next 12 months, we'll introduce that as well. And then after that, we'll do what Rackspace always does, and we'll go where our customers direct us. You know, they'll tell us what our pain points are. We'll bring that into our service portfolio in a managed expertise-based way, and then we'll go and deliver that to our customers. So you're absolutely right, much more to do, but we will, you know, we'll continue to stay on top of the technology as that advances, and we'll continue to add additional services to our portfolio. While I was answering that question, it made me think of something else. You know, one of the biggest challenges for customers, especially the ones who are having to deal with mostly technology within their security operation, it's really difficult because in this industry at the moment, what you're seeing is almost on a daily basis is new technologies being announced and new startups showing up on the market. And what was cutting edge last week is passé this week, and it's really difficult because if you think about the POC process of identifying technology and then testing it properly and making sure that it works for you, that's not easy to do. And in such a saturated environment, it's very, very difficult, especially for smaller companies to deal with. And it's somewhere that I think that we're able to help our customers quite a lot, because the way that we put Rackspace Managed Security together, we're very opinionated about the tools that we use. We don't come in and manage your tooling. If you already have a technology stack, if you've already purchased a SIM or network visibility, we don't have anything to do with that. We come with our own tool set because we know that it's effective to do what we need to do. We know that our analysts are expert on it, and it allows us to deliver this operation at scale. But that doesn't mean that we're just going to stick with the technology stack that we have. So the way that we selected our technology, we identified, I talked briefly about this earlier, we identified all the threats that we believe that our customers are at risk to. We identified the capability sets that we needed to mitigate those risks. And what I mean by capability sets are things like network visibility, things like analytics platform, things like host-based visibility, case management, all the different capabilities that you need to deliver a security operation. And then we went and we broke each one of those capabilities down into a specific set of requirements, specific to us, specific to Rackspace and how we wanted to deliver the security operation. So we're not testing a tool to see if it does what it says on the tin. We test the tool to see if it's effective in providing the requirements that we need. And I think if memory serves me correctly, there were 1,250 individual requirements. And then we went and tested a bunch of technology specifically against those requirements, and we went and engaged in a partnership with the vendors that delivered the most effective scores based on those specific requirements that we have. Our SOC manager is our capability manager. So one of the things that he's tasked with doing is constantly looking at his metrics within each one of those capabilities and constantly looking at the technology that's coming onto the market and then assessing whether or not that technology moves his capability needle. And if it does, we go and change it. And we bring in this new, whatever the new technology is. So analytics is a really good example of this. When we started this process, we didn't think we were going to use SIM. So SIM's a fairly old technology. It's 10 years old, really, in my view, not particularly effective anymore. And we felt quite strongly that big data was going to be the way to go. So some kind of big data platform was going to be our solution. But what we found was when we tested it against our requirements, that the big data platform wasn't fast enough yet. So it didn't score as highly in some of the most critical areas of the security operation as a traditional SIM did. So we actually stood both up. So we use a traditional SIM and we back that up with a big data capability as well. So when customers bring on Rackspace Managed Security, one of the things that they're getting is this kind of constant monitoring of technology and the industry. And Rackspace is a fairly big company, so we're able to stay on top of that. We have a really defined POC process. So we're able to test this technology against our operation and have a very good understanding at any one time of how effective it's going to be and how it will move the needle for us. You had a question?
Yeah, just curious. It takes, from my experience, it takes a lot of time to get to the point of maturity. So when you are onboarding client, you get all this information to build up your BIA, more or less, and focus on area of, impact. So do you have a process of intuiting so that you learn about the client, and then you can say, okay, in the next 2 months or 3 months, we are pretty much comfortable that we can take care of?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is. It's absolutely true that to be effective, especially with the type of security strategy that we have, we need to understand our client and their business and the data that we're protecting really, really well. And we deal with that in a few ways. So we stood up what we call a customer experience team, and you can think of them as kind of security account managers. But this team works very closely with the customer to gather as much information as we can from them. We're a little bit manual at the moment. We launched in January at the moment, so some of the process by which we're gathering information at the moment is being done manually, and we'll find a way to automate that and make it more effective. So we collect a lot of information that way. That's a constantly evolving process. We talk to our customers on a weekly basis. But what we also do is we learn from the tools. So with the technology that we deploy into the environment, with every passing week, what we get is a better understanding of what that environment looks like, what systems interact with other systems, what is legitimate business processes, what is normal for that customer, and these are things that are constantly being managed and then updated by a security analyst. So it's all around. Everything today is around understanding what normal looks like, and then being able to detect and respond to anything that's anomalous. And we solve that problem by gathering information and by using technology to point us in the right direction. And we're fairly effective at it at the moment, but I think what you'll see from us over the next 12 months is that we'll add additional technology to make us even more effective at that. Okay, I've got about 2 minutes left. Is there any more? I can probably do one more question. Hello.
Is it in the public cloud? I'm wondering if any of the monitoring that you're doing is extending to the public cloud, or if there's any plan.
Rackspace public cloud.
That one.
Yeah. Okay. So look, Taylor, you guys have probably heard a lot during the last few hours about Rackspace's strategy to deliver this kind of multi-cloud solution, and we have to do that because customers don't use single clouds anymore. They're using a myriad of different clouds in order to deliver their business. And if security is going to be the business enabler that we need it to do, then we have to be able to defend our customers no matter what platform they choose to defend. We don't want to be in a position where we're telling our customers that we can't defend them because they've chosen a particular platform. Now, we launched in January, initially on dedicated, and what we've done is we've allowed ourselves to be steered by customer demand of where we go next. So as you guys know, we launched on dedicated, and we went to AWS soon after that. We're now on Microsoft Azure.